Super
Hey, what's up, mediums?
Ridiculous.
We are live again on a Monday night. Welcome back. It's season 3, episode 23. I am Josh Hayes here with my co-hostesses, Chuck Manley and Scott Moon. And tonight, our guest is Walter Rhein. He is the author of the Slaves of Irafor series. It's a dark fantasy series. His second book, The Literate Thief, released in March and has garnered several good reviews on Facebook since. He's been published since 2019, and today he joins us to talk about his writing journey. Walter, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. It's good to have you on. I remember back when we had Tom Barzak on the show back in season 2. It was probably a couple days after that you sent me a first message and kind of have communicated since then.
Yeah, Tom's another guy over at Proceed, so that's how I saw you guys.
Yeah, we met Tom at OWFI. What, 2 years ago now, I think?
Yeah, 2016, I believe. Yeah. That was
great guy.
Good conference, yeah.
Great artist too. He drew a dragon right on the table when we were eating dinner.
Yeah, no, we did.
Just shoved everybody's eating, and he's just shoving plates out of the way, and then all of a sudden he starts drawing this dragon. We're all just sitting there like,
yeah.
It was pretty awesome. It was a great dream. Yeah.
He's a new father too, so he's wow. He's just had a little daughter, so congratulations to Tom on that.
Yeah, good deal. Good for Tom.
I don't know if you guys know this, but if you guys look at Chuck and Scott, they're wearing the old worn out Keystroke medium hats, and I'm wearing the new and improved.
we like to call it classic.
Classic, yes, the old school,
retro.
as it were. Oh, I like that retro. Yes, I can't be retro. I'm
classic.
I've got to be have to have the newest, coolest thing. If you are interested in a hat, I'll have it up on the website sometime this week, unless I convince somebody else to do it, in which case they will have it up this week. But they are going to be available to buy probably just around $15. The other hat's really expensive, but the newer hat's cheaper. So, but enough about us and enough about the hats and enough about ridiculousness. Walter, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got started in writing.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, I'm Walter Rhein. I'm from Wisconsin originally. I went down, once I graduated from college, I moved to Lima, Peru, which is kind of what I was able to do to pursue writing, because you could live in Lima for about $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So it didn't take a lot of time to earn money, which is kind of that's the whole key. Anybody can be a writer as long as you don't have to earn
everybody
money.
Let's go to Peru right now and write.
That's it.
Yeah. So
yeah, but don't you have to worry about getting kidnapped?
Yeah, but keeps you on your toes.
That keeps you on your toes.
No place is perfect, Josh. Come on.
You're right.
For a Christmas card, I just took the newspaper, like the local Lima newspaper, and I sat on the toilet. I put a face like this, and I sent that out as my Christmas card. My mom didn't think that was.
That's awesome.
I can't find that picture anymore. That's pretty funny. It must have destroyed out copy.
I'm sure it brought lots of holiday cheer to everybody.
Yeah. Well,
you're holding up the paper and you're like,
look how miserable. But I always tell people, it's like I've lost more money to American police than thieves in South America. So
yes.
Think about it that way.
It's kind of like all.
Yeah, at least when somebody goes after your money in South America, you have the option to fight them off. So
that's true.
And disappear into the jungle.
No, but Peru, and I shouldn't sound mean, because Peru over the last 10 years has really gotten wonderful. It's one of the top food destinations in all the world now. I worked for a couple of years as the editor for Living in Peru down there, and part of my job was just go down and do reviews of these wonderful restaurants. I do a book about it. I got this book about living in Peru called Reckless Traveler. And it was just about, I just had an epiphany after college where I'm like, enough of this, split the country, and just found it was so easy to live. I stayed there for 10 years. So
have an adventure, a 10-year adventure.
Yeah. Well, learning a foreign language is pretty important to me. And I'm going to be heading out here in a couple weeks, because I got a couple kids now and we like to keep them, immersed. You can get a college degree in Lima for just a couple grand. So I want to keep them out of debt is my long-term plan.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
My kids are definitely going to Peru for college now.
Yeah.
I read something the other day that China, like the Beijing University or like Singapore or whatever the cities are over there, you can go over there and basically almost do it for free. You go over there to China and go to college.
I believe there's options in Europe that'll do it for free as well. So it's one of those things. I mean, and it's like you guys were laughing, and you know everybody was the same. It's like you're crazy to go live in South America, but it's like it's almost free to live down here, and it's like then you're established in another country, and then just kind of escaping because we're also pre-programmed to do things a certain way. It's like, well, I want to waste my time writing, so I have to go live somewhere where it's cheap.
I had read that if you move to, I think you might apply for citizenship in Denmark, they'll pay all your living expenses for, I think, 6 months or 2 years, and your only requirement is you have to learn the language. Yeah. You go to like language class 6 hours a day.
Well, that's actually pretty fascinating too, because you'd be surprised how, because I went down there not really knowing Spanish. I'd had a couple of years of it in high school, but that's not. So I had some basic verb structure, but I'd met people at the beginning of a week and at the end of 1 week, they'd say, your Spanish is much better, but you were exhausted. It's like at the end of a month, I could more or less get around. So it's just really impressive how quickly, if it's full immersion, but that was the most exhausting thing. I came back, I went for a 3 month and then I came back and my friends are like, you look like you went to boot camp, they told me, just because there's like the stress of just learning the language. I'd lost a bunch of weight and I hit the bed at night, it's just like out instantly. I didn't realize how hard you could work, just trying to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you have to.
Absolutely. When you have to eat. Your ability to eat depends on learning the language. You learn.
Who is the other guest that he traveled abroad to write? Went over to like Thailand or
Brian Stavely went to Thailand.
Brian Stavely went to Thailand.
He was great. He got mocked by the monks. They were
right, because he was walking the stairs or something. Right?
He was training for an adventure race, and they would watch him run the stairs of this temple every day. And he says, "I know they're laughing at me," and they would sit out there and watch him. And I thought that was a great story. So we should all travel abroad.
Awesome. You can do it. It can be done. The best. I did it at a good time when I was, right out of college, and it took me about 10 years to go through college too, just because I was taking time off and working and doing what I could to get everything paid off. Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, no. But
besides not getting kidnapped, what's the type of what are the type of stories or tales that you put in this Reckless Traveler book? What do traveler readers look for when they're looking for a book like this? Because it's got 108 reviews and it's a 4.8 average. So
that's awesome.
People are reading it and they're liking it. So
well, it's what's different about that versus, because there's a lot of books that talk about, Machu Picchu or Peru, but most of those books are just, I went to Peru for 2 weeks and then I came back home. Or this was right out of college, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Go down to Peru, find I can live there, for a fraction of what it would cost me to live in the United States. And it's just this process. Like one of the things when I was working for livinginperu.com, I got this message from the government. They're like, hey, we're doing this show at the government palace. Come down and do it. So I was like, okay. So I went down there. I printed off this thing. I went down there. So I get to the government palace. And this is like going to the White House, essentially. I walked up to it. And the guys and there's all these guys with, AK-47s looking at this list. And I'm like, oh, shoot. This is a little bit more serious. So I walk up to them. They're like, well, you're not on the list. But then I just held up my little plastic card that I printed out and laminated. I'm like, yeah, I'm with Living in Peru. And they're like, oh, yeah, go on in. So I walked in. Yeah, and I walked in. I go through this security, and then the beeper goes off. I'm like, now I'm going to get searched. And they're just like, nah, go ahead. You're fine. So then I'm standing in the presidential palace, and the president walks out. He's 50 yards away from me. And it was right about then I'm like, I could cause an international incident now. It's like I could be on TV. All I have to do is run and tackle Alan Garcia, and then I'm on TV.
Yeah. But you or your body won.
So I was taking pictures of him with a BlackBerry. Everybody else had these fancy cameras. They're all dressed in suits. I'm in ripped shorts and look terrible. So then I just kind of snuck out of there. But I was telling this story to one of my friends of mine. He worked at the U.S. Embassy, and he's just like, you shouldn't have. He just didn't want to hear this story about how. And that's minimal. Some of my other American friends do much crazier stuff than that.
Why go if you're not going to do some adventurous things?
That's my thing. If you're going to go to Peru, you've got to start in the palace. That's the only rule that I have.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty easy to write a book. One of the big ones they do down there is ayahuasca. Have you heard of ayahuasca?
Oh,
I didn't think that was a real thing.
I didn't think it was a real thing either.
Dude. Absolutely.
No,
I thought that was an SPP made up thing.
No, it's
No, it's
real.
a real
I
thing.
haven't taken it, but I was out in the jungle one time with a buddy of mine, and we were hanging out with this shaman. He's like, "You guys want to take ayahuasca?" And my buddy's like, "Yeah, let's do it." I'm like, "You time out." It's like, how's your life going? It's like, he's like, do you want to kill yourself? And you're doing pretty good. He's like, I'm doing pretty good. It's like, then maybe let's pause. It's like, if you want to kill yourself, go to Peru and take ayahuasca. Maybe you'll turn the corner. But life's going good.
Maybe we should ask what it exactly is before we.
Oh yeah. Well, it's this extremely potent hallucinogenic mixture that they give you. But I have a buddy. A couple of my buddies down there in Peru have taken it, and one of them's this guy who his weight loss program. What's the rating of this show, by the way? Like PG 13?
Oh, we don't fucking care.
Okay, good. So my one buddy,
Ralph's on it since he's 17 sometimes.
So I've got a buddy.
He's gonna slam us at some point. I just know they will.
So I've got a buddy, and his weight loss program is to just like buy a bunch of cocaine and then just snort cocaine and not eat anything for like 2 weeks.
Well, you lose weight that way.
Yeah, that's his weight loss. He's like, I lost about 20 pounds this week. So. And then he goes back to operating on brains. No, he's not a brains.
Oh, that's good.
But he,
I mean, at least when he's done the operation, at least they're done quickly.
Right. Yeah.
Save me some money that way. I can get 50 done a day.
Yeah.
But he was talking about ayahuasca because he's one of these guys. He's just anything he'll take or do. But he was like, I asked him about ayahuasca. He's like, that's not a recreational drug.
Yeah.
That one you take seriously. So if a guy like that takes that shit seriously, stay away from that.
What happens in Peru stays in Peru because you're dead.
Because you have been kidnapped, force-fed ayahuasca, and murdered by the president's men.
Yeah.
We wrote half a book.
I want to read.
We wrote a book on the show.
Well, they say that everybody who takes it gets the same vision, though. They see like the anaconda, the jungle comes up to them and tells them the people they've wronged in their life, and then they have to go and make amends.
Oh,
So
See,
it's
my problem is that my anaconda don't want none unless she has buns on. So
it's just bun.
It's like combines a drug experience with a 12-step program. So I don't know. Make that a bit what you wish.
That anaconda had to bust out a laptop and be like, hold on, let me look this up. Hold on.
yeah,
I'll just send a mass email. Done. 50,000 recipients.
So you spent 10 years in Peru avoiding ayahuasca plays and writing, occasionally doing some writing.
Yeah. No, I wrote quite a bit. I taught down there. I translated. I did anything I could. But you can, it's just so easy. If you only got to make like $8,000 in a year, you can do that fairly easily.
I get bag groceries for that.
And I got to cut out. I mean, that was going to Europe once a year, going back to the United States once, going out to eat just about every day. So it was, I could have cut a lot of expenses.
Yeah. Cool.
So while you're down there reading, it looks like you've done quite a bit of short stories. Just looking at your Amazon page here, looking at your collection, you've got a couple novels out in the Slaves of Erifor series. A couple of anthologies that Janet has put on, and even a couple that Tom Barzak, a previous guest, has been in.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about your Slaves of Erifor series for a minute. You just published the second book. The first public book was published a couple of years ago, 2014. So tell us a little bit about this series and the characters in it. Your inspiration for it.
Yeah, let me hold that up. There you see it. There's the new release. I'm psyched about this because Percy, in the last couple years, has got a new art director for the covers. So I think that one looks great. The other one looks good too, but this one isn't quite as good. The first one is The Reader of Acheron. So There's that. So it's it's a fun series. I guess the best way is a heroic dystopian fantasy. You put as many slashes in there as possible. But I wanted to explore the idea of slavery and just how we kind of allow ourselves to fall into, a lot of it is just your own personal thinking, the stuff you allow yourself to believe. And a lot of these narratives that are force-fed to us, they're just not for our benefit. Right. That's kind of that's the back end. I mean, the book itself is more, it's an adventure type novel. But whenever I write something, it should be sort of a thought experiment, I feel, when you're writing a novel.
Sure.
And whether or not you come to any conclusions, it's like the process of exploring ideas as a novel. I mean, I like people that read it and come away from it, and just have something from that novel that'll help them in their life a little bit, or at least if they pause and think about it, or something that they can adapt to make useful in their own life.
Cool. Did you do anything like special, like prepare for this book or research, or what was your inspiration or your original premise? Or
Well, actually, a lot of the inspiration came from Lima, because one of the things in Lima that you see is that you've got, Lima's it's a microcosm. You got, all the United States. We never see the rich people, but like I said, in Lima, I was able to walk into the government palace, and I knew where all the restaurants where the rich people would go to. And so when I worked in Lima, and I worked for just schools and stuff that were mid-tier schools, they treated you with a lot of respect. But then if I would work with, like the expat, mainly the expat community was a problem because, they get these people where they think they're at this other level and then they treat you. So in some ways I was being treated better than I thought I should be when I worked for some schools. But then you kind of get used to it. You get kind of programmed, you think you should be treated a certain way. Then you go work for these other places and they start looking down at you. Oh, you're just an uneducated backpacker, because a lot of schools down there do hire people with no degree or whatever to teach. And so I do have a degree, so I kind of fight back. But it was just that interplay with just that perception and how people's brains work when they feel they're at a higher class than you and interacting with them. And it was just kind of an exploration of that kind of led to this, the book with this slave culture. Because, we exist in that culture within the United States as well, but it's so separated out. You don't get face-to-face on a daily basis and see and think, or get to see and think, and see how the people think who are at that higher class and how little they really, think of you. So
yeah, you're not confronted with those social injustices unless you're on Facebook or something as often.
A lot of
Twitter.
Like, well, even in your own towns, like Scott and I live in a population center that's about well over 500,000 people, and Scott and I are kind of both on the same socioeconomic.
I like ecological.
But yeah, you're right. Even in your own town, you don't see or experience some of the either the lower or the higher aspects. So
you don't realize, you think you see, like, I think I know this person, look, they have money. And then you run into somebody like Charles Koch because, he lives down the street.
Yeah.
And then you're like, that's a whole different level of richness where they probably don't even think of money in the same way as us. It's like literally a different thought experiment. And then you see, on the other hand, with what we do for a living, then you see the far end of that spectrum where you actually have people that are like, I seriously may not be able to eat today.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned.
Well, you see people be exploited, and there's a certain, I would say, there's a certain number of our populations is sociopaths, right? This is an evolutionary trait. For some reason, we need some sociopaths, and then we have very generous people, but those generous people are easy to exploit because they can't conceive of how the sociopaths think.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the things I explore in the book, and just kind of go through that is we got people in the lower class. And in the first book, I have a character who's a slave character. And he's more powerful than the people around him, but I've lived this, and one day he just has the realization. He's like, I'm going to make this decision and live by this rule that this is wrong, and then you're basically able to, move forward in the culture, and you see that this narrative that you're fed is all just a complete farce of where you belong. And if you just refuse to accept this narrative of where you belong in the social hierarchy, you can change it. You can bash people's head in with a pipe, as the book goes.
Right. Yeah, I saw the pipe on the cover.
This series, it's fantasy, it's dark fantasy. Is it past Earth, or is it a new place?
It's got an Earth. Yeah, that was one of the things I thought was an interesting kind of criticism I was getting. I get generally good reviews, but I do like reading all the reviews, and even a negative review is helpful. Especially from the first book to the second book, a lot of people, I read all the reviews, and it helped me kind of formulate what was working, what wasn't, and especially in the second book. And one of the criticisms people didn't like that I didn't explain how the world got how it was, but I thought that was kind of like, don't tell who killed the, who the murderer is on page 2. I like that as a little bit of tension.
I don't like it when they tell me why everything the way it is. That's one of the reasons I'm reading it. So it's talking of your reviews. So let's just pick one at random. So it's a 5-star review. And it says, highly recommended dystopian reading, intellectual heroic fantasy that unfolds fast and furious. It kind of sums up what you're talking about. It looks like a lot of them are viewing it as dystopian type fantasy. It's a nice blend.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's got to work. I mean, first and foremost, the book has got to be escapism. I mean, you could just pick it up and read it as an adventure story, and it's got to entertain you. I mentioned, I was talking about Bukowski before. That might have been not been on this section. But one of the things I always really appreciate about Bukowski is his readability. And I discovered, when I was teaching, I would sometimes take segments from Bukowski and teach my students. I'd give them a lot of different authors, and they'd be misbehaving with some of the authors. You'd play Bukowski and they were interestingly paying attention. And I think that's really important. You got to be able to write in a way that is accessible to everybody. And, it's got to hold your interest. And then, but I mean, for the writer or for the readers who want more, that should be in there. And you just have to sprinkle that extra stuff. You can write an interesting, you write an interesting book, and a lot of it's just leading up to, just one statement, that might just take a paragraph. And it's like these 5 different paragraphs in a book that make a book, stand out from the crowd, I think.
Well, and it's interesting to me because, especially in the last couple of years, that indie fiction has kind of taken on a life of its own, and it's become its own thing, and it's a big deal now. I don't know where these people are coming from that they say I want everything explained to me. I want it all on the nose.
Right.
I don't want any mystery. I don't want to have to figure it out, because if you look at,
that's so boring.
Yeah, well, look at the one arguably the biggest fantasy epic that has happened in our recent history, which is A Song of Ice and Fire. There are things in that book that he never explains, and there are things in that book that he never tells you, and maybe you will in the next books, but that he never tells you what's going on. And so many people are developing theories, and there's blogs about it, there's YouTube channels about it, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, see, that's the kind of cool stuff that's going on. People are like trying to figure out what he's saying in the books, and not what he's saying on a literal, non-literal basis, but what he's saying about the history of the book. And like when I hear you saying, people were saying, well, why is, like, I'm reading this 1-star review they have, so why is reading illegal? Why are there slaves? All this other stuff. That stuff that's going to come later. And maybe the fact that reading is illegal really doesn't matter in this one setting of this one book, right? And a couple of years ago, I was involved in a writer's group where we would submit samples of our work of the first page. And I submitted this sample, and it was basically we enter this scene where this plane or shuttlecraft or whatever is crashing.
In medias res.
Yeah. And they're crashing, and we don't know why they're crashing, and it's just a very dramatic scene. And like the most criticism I got was, well, where were they coming from when they crashed? And I'm like, what
they were coming from Cincinnati.
Yeah. Like, yeah, they were going to Cincinnati to watch the Bears. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The fact is that they were crashing, and these people wanted to know where they were coming from. Like, that doesn't have anything to do.
Like
you missed the whole point.
If you're dying in a ball of flame, you'd be like, what would make this better? If we were only coming from Cincinnati when this.
That's right.
I would feel much better about it.
If only we were flying east instead of west.
Yeah,
right.
That'd be totally worth it.
Well, it's like they say that some people don't like bacon, right? So if people don't like bacon,
what?
That's not true.
There are some. So
that's just crazy
think
talk.
they don't like it.
You can't please everybody. You do your best, but
right.
But then there are some negative. I read everything, and like I've been fortunate. I've got mostly positive reviews with some minor criticisms, and I'll take a legit criticism and listen to it. Another one people said was the characters were able to express themselves, because they are kind of all these illiterate slaves, but that was just taking a little bit of poetic license, I thought. As I was writing it, I'm like, they're feeling this. I need to express this in the book. I'm just going to have them say it because dialogue is more interesting, even though I guess maybe it's not logical that they would have the vocabulary to say these things and express it. But I mean, you look back at historically, there's a precedent for that too. I mean, a lot of characters in Shakespeare's plays probably don't have the education to speak like they speak.
Right.
Well, but not. I mean,
comment.
not all slaves are
express themselves in some way,
or they're just because of their biological circumstance. Like you say in the book, if you do something wrong, you can end up as a slave. So you could be a high-spoken prince or something and do something wrong theoretically, and then now you're a slave. So now they're high-spoken, kind of like Gladiator. Just because you're not lowborn doesn't mean you can't just at the drop of a hat be thrown into slavery. It happens all the time.
And one of the things I was having fun with this book was that they give out a drug called bliss to all the slaves, and over time that melts their brain, and they're zombies. They become zombies after they've been used up, But the idea is you're giving this drug to these people, and I mean, medicating a populace is always funny. I was teaching. This was back in the United States. I was teaching, and I asked my students, like, how many of you take drugs? And one kid raised his hand, but he was being a smart ass.
He's like, I was taking some ayahuasca this morning to get me fired up for this class.
That's what's in my water bottle right now.
But I said to him, I was like, oh, none of you take drugs, huh? How many of you have ever had a Coca-Cola? It's like caffeine's a drug. It's like half of you guys are on drugs already.
Sugar's practically a drug.
Yep.
Well, and then one of the greatest narrative lies of all times is the concept of side effects. Side effects may include rectal bleeding and blindness. Those are effects. They're effects of that, and they're not side effects. That's a disclaimer of my life.
May include death.
Yeah. We should make that as a
may include dying in
that's
Peru.
An effect of keystroke medium. May cause anal bleeding. Like I don't know why.
What was that stuff they were putting years ago? It was like artificial fat. They were putting it in potato chips. Olestra, and one of the side effects was anal leakage. Remember that?
God, I love these potato chips. I gotta wear a diaper when I'm.
They paid a guy a lot of money, and that was the best term he could come up with.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
that was the one where
we could put it. Anal leakage.
That was when they had a huge 15-page ad about all the horrible things that this stuff would do to pets. But then at the end it said, but it's not for animals, it's for humans.
Yeah, not for pet consumption.
May cause a Rorschach pattern to appear in your underwear. A beautiful butterfly.
I almost want to try it now.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'm down for that.
Give it to your
kids. Is it going to change as I'm looking at it? Like,
look at the golden butterfly.
Therapist.
When I look at this one way, it looks like an old lady. When I look at the other way, it looks like a young lady.
You're a crazy person.
Yeah.
No, but that's the whole idea, though. It's like these narratives exist, and we just kind of go along with them. And every time somebody says side effects may include, it's like, no, that's an effect. Don't say side effects and act like it's something other. Yeah, it's what this drug does.
It's also the primary effect.
Well, then they got to come up with diseases for these drugs that they make. Oh, this will cure. We've got a new disease that this is going to cure that you might not know about.
An answer looking for a problem. That's one of my favorite things of all times.
That's another good thing about Peru is you can get healthcare down there for $100 a year. So there's another reason to live there.
Yeah. What does a healthcare consist of?
There are a fair number of U.S. trained doctors who just kind of got fed up with the system and moved down there. That's good healthcare. But my wife's sister just had a baby down there, and so just kind of going step by step through the process with that. And it's good. I mean, if you have the funds for it, like anything else in the world, but it's much less expensive than here.
Yeah.
There was that meme on Facebook that said, you can get I forget what it was, but this procedure can be done in Spain for $3,000, and in the U.S. it's $50,000. So I could go live in Spain for a year and learn Spanish and run with the bulls and get the procedure done and spend less than I would have here.
Yeah,
that is true though.
Depending on whether you have insurance. Yeah,
people are afraid to do it, but
it probably costs you $3,000 here too, unless you have insurance. Then it costs $50,000.
Oh, yeah, then you're paying another $10 for your insurance though. Yeah. I had kidney stones in Peru. That's in the book too, so that's a fun story. When you don't know you have kidney stones.
You know what? I think I'm rethinking that ayahuasca thing. Can you give me some? I'm having a kidney stone here.
I'd rather have kidney stones instead.
Yeah, that had me buckle over. That made me realize the torture. It's like I would have given up anybody or anything. It's like you think you're tough before something like that. But I'm like, just make this stop. Yeah. I'll tell you whatever.
That's it.
Nice.
Well, we are halfway through the show, so I'd like to talk about the show sponsor for this week, which is Rick Partlow and his book Homecoming Psi War. It's the newest book from the author of Glory Boy. Rick's been on the show. He's a good friend of the show. I believe he's in the live audience today watching. So, hi, Rick. How are you? This is the description of that book. You can't outrun your past. Korri Fontenot, I'm not even going to say her last name. Korri left her family behind on Earth a century ago to fight a war that broke her body and her mind. After decades of living as an outlaw and a mercenary in the pirate worlds, she's rebuilt both and tried to move on with her life, tried to put her past behind her. The last thing she expected was her son Grant, now a rising star corporate executive, to call and ask her for her help. Her great-grandmother Jackie has followed in her footsteps. Great-granddaughter Jackie has followed in her footsteps, first as a Marine and then as a mercenary outlaw, leading a crew that specializes in ripping off pilot world cartels. But she made the mistake of breaking into a secret corporate lab and stealing an artifact of the Predecessors, the ancient alien race that built a network of wormhole jumpgates between planets they engineered for life tens of thousands of years ago before vanishing mysteriously. Now someone wants the artifact back, and they've been hunting her all across the Commonwealth. She doesn't trust the law, and Grant can't trust anyone inside his corporation, so he needs Korri to save her from the assassins on her trail. Korri enlists the help of her old friends Sandy and Ash, the pirates of the privateer Outrun. And
sounds like Atron again.
Yeah, it does. Actually, I think it is. I think Atron. Same word. And what starts out as a fight against ruthless mercenaries leads them far outside human space and into the remains of a fallen empire. For the artifact that Jackie stole isn't just an alien treasure, it's a weapon with the power to restart an ancient war, a war that could bring down all of human civilization. I like ending all my ad reads with some kind of like dramatic flair, like
dramatic voice. Yeah,
the dude.
You need a little soundboard where you can just hit a button and have
echo.
If I could figure out how to get a soundboard on here to like do little sound bites, I'd like do it.
We need a laugh reel.
Every soundbite would be Scott talking about covering his nipples. Like every
yes.
You should make a laugh reel, but it's just yourself laughing.
Right.
That'd be better. Yeah. Like multiple versions of yourself.
I've said other funny things that could be in a sound.
It's the Wilhelm laugh on repeat, or the Wilhelm scream on repeat. So anyway, Rick Partlow's Homecoming Psi War Book 1. It's in the live chat. It'll be in the video description below, and it'll also be on the YouTube the Podbean podcast and iTunes that Kayleen Williams has graciously volunteered to take over and produce. She did a fantastic job and caught us completely up on the audio side of the show. So, Kayleen, thank you very much for that. She, look, anybody who can stand me for 2 hours trying to work them through computer stuff is a rock star. That's all I'm going to say. She's a rock star because I was showing her how to edit and download and upload and all this other stuff. And I'm sure she's just sitting there like banging her head against the wall. Like, you are the worst teacher in the entire world trying to teach me this stuff. And I'm not an expert by any means, but she did a great job, and we're very appreciative of that. So, coming back to the show,
live chat.
That's right, smiley face.
I'm in the live chat. Somehow I lost it. Now I'm back. I'm trying to skim through and read up all of the shenanigans there.
Oh, there she is in the live chat saying I did awesome. So it's in writing now. I did awesome.
I as in Josh.
I dare any one of you to argue with Kayleen about that right now.
Well, you'll notice that the first person I have my technological meltdowns to is, hey, Josh, by the way, my computer locked up because it accidentally sent an email through iTunes. And he's just like, oh, God, now I got to put
that's one of those things where I hate Messenger because once you read it, it shows that you've read it. And
I know.
You can't come back like 12 hours later and be like, oh my gosh, I just saw your message.
I just saw this.
My kids had my phone. That's what I do. My kids definitely looked at that message and didn't bring it.
I was driving while I read that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Probably true.
So Walter, you've written several short stories and a couple novels, and it appears as though you're mostly traditionally published through Perseid. Tell us a little bit about your writing experience. I understand. Are you a full-time writer, or do you have? Is this kind of a part-time gig? Like, what's your lifestyle like right now? What are you?
I'm not a full-time writer. There's always. I just like to, I always like to have like 5 or 6 jobs at once. That way, you never have to be too beholden to anybody. Be like, screw this job, I'll do this other job. But I mean, the main focus is, with writing. All you can do, and this is something Janet kind of told me, is that you can do your 2 hours in the morning, and then afterwards you get kind of tired. One of my manuscripts I sent in to her, she's like, I could tell when you got tired in every one of these chapters. You were trying to do too much that day, and it's worthless. So it's just like, do your 2 hours in the morning, and then you got to fill the rest of your day with other stuff. So it's kind of, the writing inclination is to, do other things. Perseid is what I really love about Perseid is they're very interested in finding these, thought-provoking, interesting type novels. It's not, I don't have suitcases full of cash coming to me all the time, of course, but it's, that would be Disney if I was working for Disney, but but Disney's not interested in doing thought-provoking type stories, and I've never been a person. Okay, keep going. Did I hit a nerve?
No, you're absolutely true. They don't.
Well,
we can slap the name Star Wars on something and sell it and make a whole bunch of money. Let's do that.
I've been on that. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, this is when you alienate half the people listening. But growing up as okay, let's say this. This will be a fair statement. The prequels, people in our town, people camped out for 3 days prior to every one of those movies. They camped out. That's a remarkable achievement. Creative achievement. When you do something like that, you make something that makes people camp out. Where are they going to the bathroom is what I always wondered. How'd the cops not arrest them?
I'm pretty sure I got a good idea.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of interesting because George Lucas himself always refers to himself as an independent. He had to renounce the Directors Guild because he didn't want to put the names of the actors, the pre-title credits
in the front. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he thinks of himself that way. And it's the narrative. And this is I'm kind of scatterbrained because I've got all these ideas that are coming together in this book too. But that part of marketing is also discrediting other things. That's why you want, and you've seen that especially. The Marvel versus DC stuff. It really. That's been decided now because the first. Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman were flawed, but at least they were kind of ambitious. Where the Justice League was just a mess, I thought. What do you guys think about that one? I'm kind of curious.
I have not watched Justice League yet.
Yeah,
I haven't. I want to. I liked Wonder Woman. I thought Superman, Man of Steel was like literally the most painful movie I've ever watched.
Okay.
It was so exhausting.
Yeah, this is a debatable. I was walking into a briar patch here, but that one, Superman was one of the ones where I'm like, I'm an old man because it's like Russell Crowe's on a dragonfly. What's happening? I was just sitting there. I was like, but even the old one, the '78 Superman's a really weird movie. Have you watched that one recently?
Yeah.
It's just strange when you sit back and go, Superman isn't even in it for like an hour.
What's crazy to me is that the DC Marvel thing, it's not just specifically the movies, it's also the comics. Like you look at the comics over there, even 20 or 30 years, and you're like, DC is kind of, unless you're talking about Batman, in my opinion, DC is kind of like the redheaded stepchild when it comes to
I like Harley Quinn.
They always have like the second-rate storylines and the second-rate cool characters. Marvel, come on, Wolverine and X-Men and all. Even in the comics, those were the better comics, I thought.
Yeah. Well, there's the Dark Knight, which is kind of, but that's prior to the new DC. But just to bring it back around, it's just that if you're an indie person trying to throw forth a narrative, all this money is spent just to trash, everything that's not the two people that actually have enough money to promote everything to the dirt.
Right.
So it's, it just becomes one. I just wrote an article not too long ago about called "Not Worthy of Study," and when I was in college, my roommate was getting his master's degree, and he decided he was going to do his master's degree on Dune. Frank Herbert's Dune.
Awesome, man.
Yep.
Well, his teacher was, he's like, well, I'm not sure that's not quite at the level. That's not quite worthy of study. It's like, are you kidding me? This is, after the Lord of the Rings, Dune is, right there. I mean, it's this sprawling, epic,
truly epic
novel.
Tale, yeah.
But then this attitude that some things, shouldn't even be studied. And I don't think there's anything. I mean, you could go in any bookstore anywhere, grab a book, and write an interesting master's paper on it. So I think this idea, and it's really, because I mean, it's like, what else are college students of English accomplishing? They might just encourage them to go find other works. I mean, people are frustrated. I mean, people have been frustrated with the Solo movie. I mean, Solo is just an archetype. I mean, I did in my books.
I'm really sad that it's not getting as much love, because I like of all the new Star Wars movies, Solo has been my favorite one.
I haven't seen it yet.
I was so irritated with The Last Jedi. I'm just like, I'm taking a break. It was kind of my
I think that's where a lot of people are coming down on that. I think that Last Jedi was so controversial in the way that it was presented and so many people disliked it that Solo came out and they're just kind of like, I'll wait for Amazon to have it or something.
For sure. That's exactly how I am.
I like Solo.
I enjoyed Solo. I thought it was just a really good old-fashioned space adventure, and it filled in his backstory nicely. It
wasn't about Jedi powers that can reach across the universe. It was just about Solo trying to get his jam.
Yeah. I liked it a lot.
What I find interesting, though, is just the narrative surrounding The Last Jedi, where, I mean, you couldn't, because, I was always the first person to be ridiculed for praising a Star Wars film, and then this one comes out, and I'm like, I don't really like that one, and then everybody's acting, I'm getting criticized again. Which I thought was, and it was just such an intense attack. And I finally realized something was amiss when I read this story about Disney was claiming like a group of alt-right guys had released they pirated a version of The Last Jedi and made a chauvinist cut. Have you heard of this?
No.
So it's sort of like that doesn't sound, because it's like, have you ever tried to copy a Disney movie? It's like, I'll often buy a DVD and make a copy of it because the kids are always grabbing it. And you can copy any DVD, but you can't copy a Disney movie. Like, they are the most anti-pirate, in the world. Yeah. So that the idea that they let this narrative slip through, the alt-right Nazis have taken our movie and made a chauvinist cut. It seemed like totally just invented to like great.
Make some drama. Let's make some drama.
You know what though? What's the old saying? There's no such thing as bad press.
Well, and that's what I was getting to. It's like how they can completely control all narratives of anything that's released, and you're just a little indie guy. It's like, look, I want to explore this idea of why it's impossible for millennials to get ahead. And it's like, well, your book's just going to be pushed aside by, another. Well, either Kim Kardashian or why you're an idiot for not liking. You're a crying fanboy for not liking the latest Star Wars movie.
My biggest problem with The Last Jedi is, from a narrative standpoint, is basically Jedis became all powerful. They could reach across the entire universe and do anything instantaneously. I'm like, well, what does that leave for a story? Why don't they just snap their fingers and show up across the galaxy and win the battle when they're not even there? I'm like, that really kind of cuts the drama if you can do shit like that. The same reason I didn't like The Man of Steel, because Superman and the bad guys destroy every city on the planet to the ground, and somehow this is a win.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but that had a lot to do with Zack Snyder's directorial vision. I mean, he complaed about. I mean, I'm not trying to get off track here, but
no, go for it.
He actually.
When do we ever stay on
track? I actually read this story where he wanted to. He got into an argument with the producers in Batman v Superman, which I thought was horrid. But he wanted Batman to be prison raped. He wanted to have Batman get prison raped. So he just
So he's just solidly on the side of Superman.
That was kind of interesting. At least it's interesting.
I've been being quiet and because this is something I have a strong opinion on. But I'm going to tell you something right now about that. In order to
about prison rape or what are we talking about?
Well, that's another story.
We're not having any personal experiences, I hope. We're not getting into that kind of territory.
If you want to make a good genre film, and I mean, I'm talking superheroes, I'm talking space opera, I'm talking epic fantasy, you have to, A, know the source material.
Right.
If you want to make a comic book movie, you need to know comic books, and you have to love the source material so that you can give all the other people out there that love the source material exactly what it is they want, which is what Marvel has done way better than DC. Warner Brothers, they are trying to make these serious films with people in capes and cowls, and that doesn't fucking work. It never has, and it never will.
Yeah.
Done. Well, that's the thing. That's one of the major complaints I had about The Last Jedi, which I'll be a standout and say that I think, barring The Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One is probably my favorite Star Wars movie of all time.
Absolutely loved it.
Rogue One did so many things right, and the cinematography and just everything that had to do with that movie I thought was phenomenal. But like with The Last Jedi, if you could turn a ship and fly it into hyperspace and destroy an entire fleet of ships, then why did they have that whole rigmarole with the Force to blow up the Death Star? Why not just put one of those ships into hyperspace, put a droid on it, and because R2-D2 can obviously fly a ship, so put R2-D2 onto a ship, send it into hyperspace, and blow up the Death Star. Movie over. Like, if you could do that, why not just do that? So
why haven't they done it already?
Right. And so I didn't like that they did that. And, a lot of people are like, oh, they just don't like it because it's not like Star Wars and it's new and it's different. And
no, there was a lot of poorly thought out things in that.
Yeah.
In that movie, like the whole when in space battles and they're lobbing energy things to each other.
Right. Because gravity pulls stuff down in interstellar space.
What's with the freaking bombers at the beginning?
Why are these people paying me to make sure that their movies are accurate?
Let's go get them to fix this.
And that big ass cannon that they're dragging across the desert at the end. What is that all about? I mean,
it's dumb.
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing to consider, though. I mean, you take like a guy like George Lucas would have never been the guy Disney hired to make, to launch a franchise like that, right? Like the personality of a guy like Lucas. I mean, the visionary always has to do it from the outside, it seems to me.
Right.
So, I mean, I've always enjoyed, and getting back, I've always enjoyed working with these smaller publishers, publishers that have a vision about good stories rather than, just try and go and send my resume off to Disney or whatever so I can not write an interesting story about, so-and-so's backstory. I mean, you can see, though, how a big company doesn't want you to create your own characters, though, because then they don't own that character. I mean, if they want to hire a talented person to write that character, and then that writer has no power, because whatever they bring to that character is owned by the big company, right? So this is just me on my soapbox about how I think there's a lot of really great independent works out there, just smaller works.
Yeah, it takes a lot to be an innovator. It's kind of like remember the airplane movies, the comedies and stuff.
Yeah.
And when they made those, they really had to stick to their guns because the actors didn't get any of the humor. They're like, "This is the stupidest movie I've ever been a part of."
Yeah.
And it was hilarious.
He was a serious actor prior to Airplane. He was in, they said that too. The Abrams brothers just always watched his movies and laughed. It's like it's like he's hilarious. It's like he thinks he's a serious actor.
I am hilarious, and don't call me Shirley. So I want to bring it back full circle here for a little while we've got some time left on the show, and so you're not a full-time writer, so you do your 2 hours.
You said
2 hours of writing there in the morning. Is that kind of what an average day looks like for you for your writing, or how do you approach it? How do you approach your writing? Because I think it's been a long time since we've actually had a part-time traditional published author on the show, and most of the people that we have on are indies, and so they kind of approach it in a different manner, which is not to say it's better or worse, it's just different. So I'm curious on your side of things, being traditionally published and also not being full-time, how do you approach your day as a writer, and what do you put into a day of writing?
Yeah. So if I can get... Lately, I've just been trying to do, because I'm doing the next book, the third book in the series. So I've just been trying to do just like 2 pages, just try to do like 2 full pages a day. And then after that, I'll switch over. I've got my blog, my Streets of Lima blog. I don't know if you guys saw that one, but that's been, sometimes with that, you can generate some revenue from your webpage, either from, Google ads or, writing external content or whatever. I've got a couple little magazines I do some freelance for, or some articles, but writing for this Packer magazine. So there's just kind of, whatever jobs are available, you just kind of, but I like to keep the morning, the freshest early thing. That's for the book. And then a lot of it, though, is just taking advantage of your free time. If you're driving somewhere, sometimes you're kind of just working out a line of text, I'll just sit and work on it. I mean, because you can sit in the morning and write for 2 hours, and it's like a lot of that just goes in the garbage. But then sometimes you just need those good lines, so I'll be driving somewhere and you get like a 2-line, then you pull over and send a text. I'll just send myself an email with these lines. Then I keep them all together. I've got them in this. I just print them all out. So I got this big document of all these things. So I just go through it. This is ones afterwards you go through your emails and find the ones that are good and find a place to use the good lines. You kind of see that. I mean, if you looked at the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, there's sections where like Tom Bombadil says something, and then in the Lord of the Rings, the movie, it's Treebeard who says it. You could just see that they made a list of all the good lines. They got included in the movie as well, but sometimes they had to kind of shuffle them around.
Sure.
But now we're going to be talking about Lord of the Rings for 2 hours.
That's good.
I actually didn't mind Lord of the Rings, the first movies. It's The Hobbit I have a problem with.
Yeah. Even though now that there's an extended edition, it's like, shit, I'll watch the extended edition of that. It's like I could hardly get through them the first time, but it's like, it's been a couple years now. It's Middle Earth. I'll watch that.
Why not?
So are you working on book 3 of your series, or what are you working on?
Maybe book 3 of the series. I've co-authored a kind of a paranormal romance thriller with a buddy of mine. So we're just kind of sitting. We're trying to figure out what to do with that one. That one's kind of, but it's always good to have kind of a novel in your back pocket because sometimes opportunities pop up, and it's not necessarily the thing Percy would publish. So just kind of seeing what else is out there. In addition to Percy, I work. The other one is Heron. I don't remember if they're Heron Press or Heron Publishing, but they've got some good stuff that they do too. Jesse Duckworth.
I'm always curious about that because, you see so many authors that are traditional that when you think of traditional authors, you're like, oh, they sit in an office smoking a pipe, typing on their typewriter, and then they send it into their publisher and they get it done. But I think the majority of traditional the majority of authors, period. But I think the majority in either camp is still working a day job like most of us and publishing. And so I'm always curious because like for me, I sit down and I get 2 or 3 hours in the morning and I try to get 1,500 words in, and I'm trying to get the words in and the words done and get the books out. And I've always got different things on the different irons in the fire, trying to get things out there and eyes on different things. So I'm always curious about,
and there's a lot of lies too. A lot of people just aren't straight about how it works. A lot of people like misrepresent. And this is it probably would help me if I was slicker like Tony Robbins or something like that, get on board and do all this. But, the reality is the most important thing is writing a good story. And Janet over at Percy Press, she always says, it's like, it's going to find its audience. You just got to put the good stuff out there.
So what are some?
You don't believe that? Yeah.
I think it will find an audience if you get it in front of enough people that they see it. You can't just sit back in your
That's true. That is very
trust
true.
the quality to sell itself. It just doesn't work that way.
The problem, I got a great story that goes right along with that. So when I was 18 years old, I decided I was going to play the guitar. Actually, I'd started playing before that. By the time I was 18, I was like, I'm giving it everything I got. I practiced 12 hours a day. I'm going to Hollywood to be a musician. And I remember walking down the street at the school I was going to, and there's people with guitars walking everywhere, like hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, every one of those guys can play Eruption by Eddie Van Halen, because that was the pinnacle of guitar playing awesomeness at the time. And I was like, there are literally 100 people just in my random site on the street that can play something I can't even play yet, even though I practice 12 hours a day. And I'm like, talent's not enough.
Yeah.
There's more to it.
We just watch like American Idol, and it's like you get down to the last 10 or whatever, and it's like they're all the same. It's like there's all those good singers out there.
There's so many awesome people. There's so many awesome performers, writers, awesome at all kinds of different things out there. And they might have a huge influence in their sphere, and it's a good thing. But I think that's we're talking about the lies that we tell our kids or we've been told we're growing up. One of them is that if you're really good, you'll be successful. That's not true.
No, that's not true. Not at all.
And
you can't do anything you dream about.
Nothing is more common than failed talent.
Exactly.
We were talking though it's because there is a narrative out there to squash, the other talent. I mean, there's, being up at the top is great, and then step 2 is keeping everybody else down while you stay up there. So that does exist, even though that sounds like sour grapes when you say it, but it's reality.
And I do see that in different marketplaces. I see that the least though in the indie space. I'm not I'm not a purist when it comes to indie in any fashion. I think traditional is a good avenue if that's what you want to do, and even hybrid would be even kind of the best of both worlds. But
I think that's the sweet spot, really.
And there's a point in time where I want to try to go traditional and seek that out and do that, but I think in the indie space you see the least amount of where somebody gets on top and then wants to push the other guy down. You might not see the guy on top helping out the guy on the bottom as much, but I don't think you're going to see the guy on top saying don't buy the guy on the bottom's book. I don't see that a lot.
You also have to consider that we don't compete in the traditional sense. We're not like a car dealership where this guy has to buy my car or buy your car, because this week somebody might buy my book and read it, and then next week they'll buy your book and read it, or they might buy both of them and read them in whatever order they want. It's not going to buy 2 cars. It's not a classic competition model where it's all or nothing. So I think that's a big part of the writing profession in general, really.
The authors, I think, always support each other. It's the other entities that you have to be concerned with.
Every now and then you get the one person who is just a jerkwad that doesn't get it, that we should all work together. Then they usually crash and burn. And every now and then, and it's usually loud and noisy, and it's usually on Facebook when it happens. So
I mean, there has been some people that are quite cocky about their books. That's an inside joke, but Bart said it right. The indie community is always kind of held each other up, and that's what I like about it. And that's what I've always kind of wanted to promote in the indie community and with this program is just kind of lifting everybody up, whether you're making $100,000 a year or $1 a year. It doesn't matter. We're all kind of in the same boat.
Rising tide.
We should be, because writing, and I think creators in general, I've always said this, are we're not like stable. Stay with me on this. We're all kind of ups and downs, because we envision great, amazing things, and we have all this amazing imagination. And then, so you can go really high with your imagination, but you can come down really hard. And so we all kind of are a little bit on a fucked up roller coaster with that. So we need to help each other, because
it can be soul crushing. It's important.
And so we need to be able to help each other.
Important to keep your objectives in mind and what you consider, a success. If you successfully achieve what you were trying to say in your novel and get it out there and people respond well to it, you should be happy.
So what do you got going on this year? We're just starting in June, so we've got 6 months left in the year. What do you got going on this year?
Yeah, well, then going down to Peru, we go down. I always work online, and my wife works in the school district, and she's from Peru, so I met her down there and we got married. So we try to go down there and keep our kids immersed in Spanish. So we'll be there for about 2 months. And then after that, it's coming back and, just the same routine. Hopefully I'll have this book finished in the next, we'll see how much I get done on it over the summer in Peru. But hopefully I'll have the first draft done by the time we get back, and then I'll continue working on that. And apart from that, it's just doing what I always do, submitting articles to the couple publications that take them. And that's the other thing. Once you get editors that like working with you, you keep those guys happy. That's a lot easier than finding one.
That's true.
Yeah. You're back to square one. And that's another thing like we were just talking about. I mean, it's like you're working, and you can't find anybody to accept your stuff. It's like I've got a couple people that like my stuff, that I've found over 10 years of doing this or 15 years. And that makes that easier. But the second, if they move on, I'll be back down, back starting over again, finding new guys.
Yep.
It's the same thing with trying to make like a career change or a genre change or something. You gotta there's that getting your market opened up thing,
Yeah, it's got to be exploring new things and trying out new things, and it's fun though. There's always a new way you can take whatever idea you have and put it in a new genre, and it's pretty interesting stuff.
What we do is amazing if you think about it. And in Stephen King's book, he talks about that basically writing is like was it telepathy? I get that wrong.
Yeah.
Because you're taking something that's in my head and I'm putting it in your head.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That's
it's scary.
I was just backing up on my hard drives because I think this is part of the writing compulsion. It's just like you don't want to lose any of that stuff. So I have 4 2-terabyte hard drives floating around my house that you don't want to lose any of these things. It's kind of crazy. At the end of your life, I wonder how many terabytes of photos and stories and craziness I'll have.
Oh yeah.
A bunch.
Oh yeah. I've got a.
I'll be in landfill someday.
I've got a 1 terabyte Thunderbolt drive, a 5 terabyte USB drive. I've got a 1 terabyte Dropbox. I've got like 4 Google accounts with gigabytes of I've got stuff saved everywhere.
Compulsively saving, and it's pretty much writing too, because you want to compulsively save all the crazy thoughts that go through your head.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Save your darlings.
No,
I just try when it comes down to it. I just try to write something I hope is useful for my kids to read, and just because there's just so many narratives out there to get you to do something other than what's in your best interest, and we've all just kind of get programmed with that, and so it's kind of nice to attack that stuff and try to take it apart a little, see what's true and what isn't.
I want to write something that'll get my grandson laid.
See, that's why Chuck's my hero. I need something. I need something useful.
Something one day that is so popular that when my grandson, who is 8 now, when he is say 25 or 30, he's walking through an airport and some attractive young woman is there reading it. And he says, "Hey, my granddad wrote that," and the night turns out good for him.
It's like,
that is my definition of success.
God, I've never thought of success that way, but holy crap, I'm gonna start thinking about it that way.
Life change right there.
If you learned one thing on
that
KSN
would make me
tonight,
the ultimate wingman.
It was how to get. We should title this episode "How to Get Your Grandson Laid," and like ultimate bestseller. It's like I got a title for a book: "How to Get Your Grandson Laid While Taking a Plane Ride to Peru to Live Out Your Dreams and not getting kidnapped and to take ayahuasca." Like the longest book title.
How to meet people and influence friends without taking ayahuasca,
and then subtitle "An Inspirational Journey." Good times.
That's too much power for one.
Maybe much too much, but it came at the end, so that's good. I mean, everybody's already passed out now, so it's okay. Nobody's even really listening, so we're good. Speaking of the people that are listening, everybody that joined us in the live show, thanks for hanging out and sharing.
Great crowd tonight.
Always good times to see old faces and new faces.
I have to throw this in there. Rick says it's weird hearing Scott curse. He obviously is not around me much.
Wait till his computer messes up, and then
hang out in the pre-show sometime.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Actually,
we need to record our post show sometime. People are like, these guys are freaking crazy.
We should never do that.
Walter, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to hang out with us, man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
A good conversation and always a good time to meet a new writer. That's what I say. The more writers I meet, the better.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all your experiences. Because the chances of me going to live in Peru for 10 years are pretty slim. So I have to live vicariously.
Vicariously through you.
Well, we just basically scraped the tip of the iceberg, so we can keep going.
I bet.
Let's choose a random member of the audience to force them to go to Peru and then we'll. Okay, let's send Hank to Peru. That's a good. Hank would be great selected to go to Peru, and if he gets kidnapped, then we can do a story on Hank's kidnapping. We can call it the Salvation of Hank.
There's a movie called Let's Get Harry. That'll be
Let's Get Hank.
Yeah,
let's get Hank.
The title's Hank dies at the end.
It's kind of sad for Hank, but it's a bestseller. Bestseller. Take one for the team.
Oh my gosh!
Don't worry, Team Keystroke Medium is on the way.
That's right. We're there. We're on our way down. Let's see. So coming up next week on the 11th. On Monday night. I like these Monday night shows. They oh yeah, Proof of Life Hake Edition. Peter Nealon says it. Great movie, by the way. Great movie.
That was a good one.
So let's see.
The last heyday of Meg Ryan, that one.
Yeah,
she
before
fell off the end of the earth after
like
that.
before she fell off and got her lips all messed up. Yeah,
her face just fell right off her skull.
Yeah,
after that.
Now it's all like. Rah.
She started looking like Russell Crowe.
That's too mean. I love that.
That's horrible. On Russell Crowe's note, next week we have Nathan Heisted coming on the show talking about his books and his publishing business, Woodbridge Press. On the 18th, we're going to have another roundtable, and hopefully, Ralph will be as drunk for that one as he was for the last one. We'll tell him that it's starting at a wrong time so he can start drinking an hour too early. On the 25th, Richard Fox will come on the show. We're going to have some really exclusive stuff.
That's going to be awesome.
On that show, we're going to talk about a reader survey that he did recently for his newsletter, and also we're going to share maybe some covers for some upcoming books
reveals
that you guys might be concerned about. On the 2nd of July, we have Mark Allen Edelheit coming back to the show, and then right now we have 1, 2, 3. Rhett Bruno, A.K. Meeks, and then the audiobook narrator Michael Kramer coming on the show in July. So July is going to be like just a packed month of some phenomenal guests. So
we've been talking about Michael Kramer for a while. I didn't know we'd actually lock that down. That's awesome. I'm listening to Wheel of Time right now.
He's locked down. He's definitely locked down. Well, he's locked down until he says that he's really super busy and he can't do it. But as of right now, he's good. So, keep coming back every Monday. Just a reminder, it's 8 p.m. Monday, and that's for the guests as well as the hosts, because all the hosts except for me forgot about it today. And
I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. You think I would call you out about that? I completely forgot. My wife reminded me.
No, that was Chuck. I actually remember Chuck.
Actually, that was me. Yeah.
See,
ridiculous.
Take that. I demand a retraction.
Okay, just redact the last 5 minutes. But everybody come back next week. We're definitely going to talk about some writing. We're definitely going to talk about some reading. And, of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a great Monday night. Bye.